The morning mist hung heavy over Tbilisi's skyline as housekeeping supervisor Nino Karabava climbed the emergency stairs of the luxury Radisson Blu Hotel. At 6:47 a.m. on March 15, 2019, what she discovered would shatter the carefully constructed lies of a Dubai businessman and expose a web of deception that stretched from Georgia's capital back to the gleaming towers of the UAE. A woman's body lay crumpled near the fire exit on the 7th floor, her designer dress, purchased just days earlier in Dubai Mall, now torn and stained. The CCTV camera that should have recorded this section of the stairwell showed a suspicious gap in footage between 2:11 a.m. and 3:07 a.m., a technical malfunction that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Hotel security rushed to secure the scene as Georgian police arrived within minutes. The woman's ID showed her as Amal Al Mansoori, wife of Majid Al Mansoori, a Dubai-based network technician attending his company's corporate retreat. But something felt wrong from the very beginning. Detective Georgim Chedlids, arriving at the scene 40 minutes later, would later write in his report, "The woman registered as Amal Al Mansoori wasn't who she claimed to be. 6 months earlier, Majid Al Mansoori had always been the invisible man in his own life. At 34, he lived in a modest apartment in Dara's Al Murr district, where the call to prayer marked the rhythm of his structured days. His weathered hands told the story of 8 years spent crawling through server rooms as a network maintenance technician for Emirates Digital Infrastructure, a government contractor that kept Dubai's digital backbone running. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., Majid would wake for far prayers, then prepare for another day troubleshooting network failures across Dubai's construction sites. His supervisor valued his reliability. He never called in sick, never complained about overtime. To his colleagues, he was simply part of the machinery, competent but unremarkable. His marriage to Amal had started with promise 8 years earlier. She was a teacher's daughter from Sharjah, quiet and devout, exactly what his family had hoped for. But the spark had gradually dimmed into routine. Their conversations revolved around household expenses, family obligations, and Amal's increasingly pointed comments about their childless state. The pressure from both families to produce grandchildren had become a constant weight. Financially, Majid carried the burden of supporting not just his wife but his aging parents and his younger brother's university education. His monthly salary of 8,500 dirhams stretched thin after sending 2,000 home to his family. The expensive dinners that filled his friends' social media feeds seemed like fantasies from another world. But it was the emotional invisibility that hurt most. At home, Amal barely looked up from her phone when he entered. At work, his contributions went unnoticed unless something broke. Majid had begun to feel like a ghost haunting his own existence, present but never truly seen or valued. During this same period, Alina Kovacs arrived in Dubai on a tourist visa in September 2018, carrying nothing but a worn backpack and the weight of her family's financial desperation. At 28, she had exhausted every legal option in Budapest: restaurant work that barely covered rent, cleaning jobs that paid in cash, language tutoring that ended when students stopped showing up. Her mother's cancer diagnosis had changed everything. The treatments not covered by Hungary's healthcare system cost more than Alina could earn in a year through legitimate work. Her 17-year-old brother needed money for university applications. When a friend mentioned the money that could be made in Dubai's gray economy, Alina made a decision that would ultimately cost her life. Unlike the flashy escort advertisements that filled Dubai's underground networks, Alina maintained strict boundaries. She never posted photos online, never used social media, and never stayed in the same hotel twice. She spoke 4 languages fluently, making her valuable to businessmen who valued discretion above all else. The money she earned went immediately to wire transfers back to Budapest. Bank records would later show she sent home $3,200 every month, keeping only enough for basic rent in International City and simple meals. She owned 3 modest dresses, a single pair of heels, and a phone with an encrypted messaging app. There were no designer bags, no luxury cars, just a desperate woman doing whatever was necessary to save her family. What made Alina different was her emotional intelligence. She understood that clients weren't just seeking physical companionship, but someone who would listen without judgment. Her quiet demeanor and genuine empathy made men feel comfortable confiding in her. This quality would transform her professional relationship with Majid into something much more dangerous. Their paths crossed through an encrypted platform called Dubai Companions. Majid's profile was sparse: age, profession, and a preference for intellectual conversation. He had spent weeks browsing before finally messaging Alina, drawn to her photograph that showed intelligent eyes rather than the heavily filtered glamour shots that dominated the site. Their initial encounter in November 2018 took place at a modest hotel in Bur, Dubai. Majid arrived nervous, having never done anything like this before, while Alina was professional but kind. What was supposed to be a 2-hour arrangement stretched to 4 as they talked about everything except the transaction that had brought them together. For the first 2 months, their meetings followed a strict pattern. But the shift began in January 2019 when Majid started visiting twice a week instead of monthly. He would arrive stressed, and Alina would listen as he described feeling trapped in a life that seemed to belong to someone else. By February, their meetings had evolved into something resembling genuine friendship. Majid brought small gifts, Hungarian chocolate, books in her native language. Alina began sharing personal details about her family's situation and her fears about the future. The red flag neither recognized was how their professional arrangement had transformed into emotional dependency. Majid was no longer paying for a service but for the feeling of being important to someone. This blurred boundary would prove catastrophic when stakes suddenly escalated beyond anything either had prepared for. The corporate memo arrived in Majid's work email on a mundane Wednesday morning in February 2019, buried between routine network maintenance updates and budget reports. Emirates Digital Infrastructure Annual Strategic Retreat, Tbilisi, Georgia, March 12 to 16, 2019. All senior technicians and their spouses are invited to attend this exclusive corporate development program featuring team-building exercises, strategic planning sessions, and cultural activities in beautiful Tbilisi. Majid stared at the screen, his coffee growing cold as the possibilities crystallized in his mind. For months, his relationship with Alina had existed in the shadows of Dubai's anonymous hotel rooms, stolen hours that felt more real than his entire marriage. The retreat represented something he had never dared imagine, a chance to live openly with her, even if built on a foundation of lies. The company would cover all expenses, including flights, accommodation, and meals. It was an opportunity that felt like destiny calling. That evening, he sat across from Amal at their small dining table, watching her scroll through her phone while mechanically eating the dinner he had prepared. The familiar silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic from Sheikh Zayed Road. When he mentioned the retreat, her reaction was predictable, mild interest followed by immediate acceptance that she wouldn't be included. "It's staff only?" Majid lied smoothly, surprised by how easily the deception came. "Very focused on technical training and corporate strategy. You'd be bored to death." Amal nodded absently, already turning her attention back to her phone. Her lack of disappointment stung more than he expected, confirming what he already knew about the state of their marriage. Over the following weeks, Majid meticulously planned the deception with the attention to detail that made him excellent at network troubleshooting. He studied the company's travel booking system, noting that HR required only basic spouse information: full name, passport number, and date of birth. No photo verification, no additional documentation. The oversight that was meant to streamline corporate travel would become the foundation of his elaborate fraud. Alina's passport showed her real name, but the booking system allowed him to enter Majid Al Mansoori as the traveler while using Alina's actual passport details. The discrepancy would only be noticed if someone compared the booking records with the physical documents, something that rarely happened in the routine processing of corporate travel. He arranged separate flights, his on the company's group booking, hers on a ticket he purchased privately, timed to arrive 2 hours after his. The hotel confirmation listed Mr. and Mrs. Al Mansoori in a deluxe suite, part of the corporate block reservation. Everything appeared legitimate on paper while hiding the identity switch that would make their fantasy possible. When Majid first explained the plan to Alina during one of their regular meetings at a business hotel in Dera, her reaction was a mixture of excitement and terror. For the first time since arriving in Dubai, she would experience something resembling a normal relationship: dinners in public, sleeping in the same bed through the entire night, waking up together. The prospect of 4 days pretending to be a respectable married couple appealed to a part of her that she had been forced to suppress. "I'll be your wife," she said with a smile that transformed her face, making her look younger and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. A real wife, not just someone you visit in hotel rooms. The joy in her voice was infectious, and for a moment, Majid allowed himself to believe that this could be more than just an elaborate charade. Tbilisi's Sharjah Rustaveli airport welcomed them with the crisp air of early spring and the promise of adventure. Majid's corporate group had arrived earlier, and he felt a thrill of anticipation as he waited for Alina's flight. When she emerged from customs wearing a conservative dress and carrying a modest suitcase, she looked every inch the dutiful corporate wife. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the careful makeup and styled hair of their Dubai meetings, replaced by the understated elegance of a woman accompanying her husband on business. The taxi ride to the Radisson Blu felt like a honeymoon. Alina pressed against the window, marveling at Tbilisi's mix of ancient architecture and Soviet-era buildings. She had never traveled outside the Middle East since arriving in Dubai, and the excitement was genuine. Majid found himself seeing the city through her eyes, sharing her wonder at the unfamiliar landscape. Hotel check-in proceeded flawlessly. The desk clerk glanced briefly at their passports, noted the names matched the reservation, and handed over their key cards with professional efficiency. "Welcome to Tbilisi, Mr. and Mrs. Al Mansoori. I hope you enjoy your stay with us." The words sent a secret thrill through both of them. For this week, they truly were husband and wife. Their suite overlooked the Kara River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with afternoon light. Alina moved through the room like a woman discovering her new home, touching the expensive furnishings, testing the softness of the bed, standing on the balcony to take in the view. Her happiness was radiant and infectious. "This is how it could be," she said, wrapping her arms around Majid as they stood together watching the sunset paint the city in golden hues. "This is how it should be." For those first few hours, surrounded by luxury and possibilities, they both allowed themselves to believe in the fantasy they had created. The welcome dinner that evening would be their first test. Mingling with Majid's colleagues and their actual wives, they would need to maintain their performance under scrutiny. As they dressed for the evening, Alina in a new dress purchased specifically for this trip, Majid in his best suit, they felt like actors preparing for the most important performance of their lives. Neither suspected that their elaborate deception would soon spiral into something far more dangerous than either had imagined. The second evening in Tbilisi had begun like a fairy tale. After the corporate dinner and networking sessions, Majid and Alina returned to their sweet giddy with the success of their performance. His colleagues had complimented him on his charming wife, and she had navigated conversations about Dubai's social life with carefully researched responses. They had opened a bottle of Georgian wine from the minibar and stood on their balcony, watching the city lights reflect in the Kara River below. But as they prepared for bed, Alina's demeanor shifted. The radiant smile that had illuminated her face all day faded, replaced by an expression Majid had never seen before. A mixture of determination and fear that made his stomach clench with sudden apprehension. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the floor as if gathering courage for something momentous. "Majid," she said quietly, her accent thicker than usual, a sign of stress he had learned to recognize. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before we came here, but I wasn't sure, and I hoped I was wrong." She reached into her small travel bag and withdrew a white plastic stick, placing it carefully on the bedside table between them. The pregnancy test showed 2 clear pink lines. Majid stared at it as if it were an explosive device, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The wine turned to acid in his stomach as the implications crashed over him in waves. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not when everything was finally perfect between them. "This is a joke," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're trying to manipulate me. You think if you claim to be pregnant, I'll leave my wife and marry you." The words came out harsher than he intended, fueled by panic rather than genuine belief. He had spent enough time with Alina to know she wasn't capable of such calculated deception. Alina's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. Manipulate you? I've been supporting my dying mother and putting my brother through school while you play house with me in hotel rooms. I don't need to manipulate anyone for money. I take the test 3 times because I hope is wrong, but is not wrong. I am pregnant, and this baby is yours. The certainty in her voice cut through his denial like a blade. Majid sank into the room's single armchair, his head in his hands as the full scope of the catastrophe became clear. A child. An illegitimate child with a woman who wasn't his wife. In the UAE, adultery was still a criminal offense, punishable by imprisonment and deportation. His career would be destroyed, his family would disown him, his community would shun him forever. I can't, he whispered. You don't understand what this means. If anyone finds out, I lose everything. My job, my family, my entire life. They'll prosecute me under UAE law. I could go to prison. Alina stood and moved to the window, her silhouette outlined against the Georgian night. I understand more than you think. I understand that I am alone in foreign country with no family, no support, and now I carry your child. I understand that I cannot work in my condition, that I will lose income one need to save my mother's life. But I also understand that this baby is not mistake to be erased. Her voice grew stronger, more resolute. I am keeping this child, Majid. With or without you, I am keeping it. But you will not pretend it doesn't exist. You will not hide behind your comfortable lies while I struggle alone. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of Tbilisi's nightlife filtering through the windows. Majid's mind raced through impossible calculations. Child support payments that would drain his savings. Divorce proceedings that would cost him half his assets. The shame of facing his parents, his colleagues, his community. The child would need to be acknowledged, documented, supported. A permanent reminder of his betrayal visible to everyone who mattered in his carefully constructed life. What do you want from me? He asked finally, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Alina turned from the window, her expression hardening into something he had never seen before. I want honesty. I want you to stop pretending this is just some game we play in hotel rooms. I want recognition that this child exists and support for its future. And if you cannot give me these things willingly, I will take them by force. The threat was implicit but clear. Majid felt the walls of the luxurious hotel suite closing in around him as he realized how much evidence of their relationship existed. Months of text messages, financial transfers, hotel bookings. Digital breadcrumbs that would lead investigators directly to their affair if Alina chose to expose him. You would destroy me, he said. Not really a question but a statement of dawning comprehension. You would destroy yourself, she replied coldly. I would simply tell the truth. Your wife deserves to know what kind of man she married. Your company deserves to know what kind of employee they're promoting. Your child deserves to have a father who acknowledges its existence. The Georgian wine bottle sat empty on the table between them, a remnant of their earlier happiness now seeming like evidence from another lifetime. The fantasy they had constructed over the past few days was crumbling, revealing the ugly reality beneath. Majid stared at the pregnancy test, understanding that this small plastic stick had just rewritten the entire trajectory of his life. In that moment, surrounded by the luxury of their fraudulent honeymoon, both of them realized they had crossed a line from which there could be no return. The game they had been playing had suddenly become deadly serious, with stakes neither of them had been prepared to handle. As the Tbilisi night deepened around them, the stage was set for the final act of their tragic deception. The third night in Tbilisi brought no sleep for either of them. They had maintained the charade during the day's corporate activities, smiling through team-building exercises, making small talk at lunch, pretending to be the perfect married couple. But the pregnancy revelation had poisoned everything between them, turning their shared suite into a battlefield of whispered arguments and cold silences. By 1:30 a.m., they were no longer pretending to sleep. Majid sat in the armchair by the window, still dressed, staring out at the city lights while his mind churned through impossible scenarios. Alina lay on the bed fully clothed, her hands unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silence between them had grown toxic, heavy with unspoken threats and desperate calculations. "I've been thinking," Alina said finally, her voice cutting through the darkness, "about what happens when we return to Dubai, about what story I will tell your wife when I call her, about what your colleagues will think when they learn the truth about this trip." Majid's hands clenched into fists. "You're making a mistake if you think threatening me will get you what you want. I won't be blackmailed." She sat up on the bed, her eyes reflecting the amber streetlights from outside. "This is not blackmail. This is reality. I am pregnant with your child. Your wife has right to know. Your company has right to know they sent you on business trip with Mistress using fraud documents. These are facts, not threats." "Nobody will believe you," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They both knew how much evidence existed of their relationship, how easily the truth could be verified. Alina reached for her phone on the bedside table, her fingers moving across the screen. "Your wife's number is easy to find. Social media makes everything simple now. I think I call her now. Tell her where her husband really is and with who." The sight of her scrolling through her contacts triggered something primal in Majid. Months of pressure, years of feeling invisible and unimportant, the crushing weight of his collapsing world. It all converged into a single moment of explosive rage. He lunged from the chair, grabbing for her phone, but she pulled it away. "You think I won't do it?" she said, her voice rising. "You think I am just some weak woman you can use and throw away? I have nothing left to lose, Majid. Nothing. My mother is dying, my brother needs money for university, and now I carry your child. I will not be silent anymore." He could see her finger hovering over the call button, and something inside him snapped. The civilized facade he had maintained his entire life crumbled in an instant, revealing something dark and desperate underneath. His hands moved without conscious thought, reaching for her throat to stop the words that would destroy everything. "Stop," he whispered, his fingers tightening around her neck. "Please, just stop talking." But Alina continued to struggle, her eyes wide with shock and growing fear. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. What happened next lasted only minutes but felt like hours. The rational part of Majid's mind watched in horror as his hands maintained their grip, as Alina's struggles gradually weakened, as the light faded from her eyes. When her body finally went limp, he stared at her for a long moment, unable to process what he had done. The aftermath struck him like a physical blow. Alina lay motionless on the bed, her neck bearing the clear marks of his fingers, her phone displaying his wife's contact information on the cracked screen. The woman who had listened to his problems, who had made him feel important, who was carrying his child. He had killed her with his own hands. Panic replaced rage as the magnitude of his situation became clear. In a few hours, housekeeping would arrive. His colleagues expected to see him at breakfast. The corporate retreat would continue, but now with a dead body in his room. He had perhaps 6 hours before her absence would be noticed, before questions would be asked that he couldn't answer. Moving with mechanical precision born of desperation, Majid began the cover-up. He wrapped Alina's body in the bedsheet, checking the hallway through the security peephole before carrying her to the emergency stairwell. The 7th-floor fire exit was deserted at 2:15 a.m., the CCTV camera positioned at an angle that created a blind spot near the landing. He positioned her body to suggest a fall, then returned to the room to eliminate evidence. Her phone was wiped and placed beside the body. He stripped the bed linens, finding no blood but replacing them anyway with spares from the closet. The room was cleaned methodically, every surface wiped down, every trace of struggle removed. By 3:20 a.m., he was back in bed, forcing himself to breathe normally, to appear as though he had been sleeping peacefully all night. When morning came, he would claim that Alina had seemed depressed, that she had spoken of feeling trapped, that he had awakened to find her gone from the room. Dawn brought the inevitable discovery. Nino Karabava's scream echoed through the stairwell at 6:47 a.m., followed by the rapid response of hotel security and Georgian police. By 7:30 a.m., Majid found himself in the hotel lobby, surrounded by investigators and colleagues, playing the role of the shocked and grieving husband. She was depressed, he told Detective Mchedlitz, his voice carefully modulated to suggest barely controlled emotion. Being away from home, the pressure of the corporate environment, she said she felt out of place. When I woke up this morning, she was gone. I thought maybe she had gone for a walk to clear her head. The detective studied him with sharp eyes, noting inconsistencies that would later prove crucial. But for now, Majid maintained his performance, unaware that the evidence he had tried so desperately to hide would soon expose the truth about what had really happened in room 712 during those dark early morning hours in Tbilisi. The autopsy results arrived at the Georgian Ministry of Internal Affairs 3 days after the discovery, and they immediately contradicted Majid's carefully constructed narrative. Dr. Nana Tsereteli, Tbilisi's chief medical examiner, found clear evidence of manual strangulation, bruising patterns on the neck consistent with thumb and finger pressure, petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, and a fractured hyoid bone. Most damning of all, there were no defensive wounds on Alina's hands or arms, suggesting she had known and trusted her attacker enough to be caught completely off guard. This was not a fall or suicide, Dr. Tsereteli reported to Detective Mchedlitz. The victim was strangled by someone with considerable upper body strength, someone close enough to her to apply sustained pressure without triggering a struggle. The positioning of the bruises suggests the killer was facing her, likely during what appeared to be an intimate conversation. The digital forensics team, working with equipment borrowed from Georgia's cybercrime unit, managed to recover deleted data from Alina's phone despite Majid's attempts to wipe it clean. Advanced data recovery techniques revealed a partially composed Gmail draft that sent chills through the investigation team. If anything happens to me, it was Majid Al Mansoori from Dubai. He brought me here pretending I was his wife. He is desperate and becoming dangerous. I am pregnant with his child, and he cannot accept this reality. The message was timestamped at 11:47 p.m. on March 14th, just hours before her death, indicating that Alina had sensed the growing danger and attempted to protect herself. The draft also contained detailed information about their relationship, including dates, locations of their meetings in Dubai, and financial transactions that could be easily verified. CCTV analysis revealed further inconsistencies in Majid's story. The hotel's security footage showed him leaving his room at 2:11 a.m. and returning at 3:07 a.m., during the exact window when the stairwell camera experienced its convenient malfunction. More importantly, careful examination of earlier footage showed him studying the camera positions throughout the hotel during the previous day, behavior that suggested premeditation rather than a crime of passion. The pressure of Detective Mchedlid's interrogation proved too much for Majid's carefully rehearsed performance. Under questioning that stretched over 18 hours across 3 days, his story began to unravel. The detective had methodically reconstructed the evidence, presenting each contradiction calmly and professionally until Majid's composure finally cracked. You say your wife was depressed, but the hotel staff describe her as excited and happy during your first 2 days here, Mchedlidz observed during their final session. You claim she left the room sometime during the night, but you never reported her missing until after the body was discovered. You say you were sleeping, but the cameras show you moving through the hotel during the exact time frame of her death. Faced with the mounting evidence and his own exhaustion, Majid's defenses collapsed entirely. I didn't mean to kill her, he whispered, his head in his hands. She said she would ruin me, destroy everything I had worked for. She was going to call my wife, tell my company about the fraud, expose everything. I just wanted her to stop talking, to stop threatening me. When I put my hands on her throat, I just wanted her to be quiet. But she kept struggling, and I couldn't let go. The confession was recorded and witnessed, marking the official end of the investigation and the beginning of legal proceedings that would span 2 countries and destroy multiple lives. The phone call that shattered Amal Al Mansoori's world came not from her husband but from a consular officer at the UAE embassy in Tbilisi. Mrs. Al Mansoori, I'm calling about your husband Majid. There's been a serious incident involving a woman who was traveling with him under your identity. We need you to come to the embassy immediately to sort out some identification issues. Within hours, Amal learned that her husband of 8 years had been arrested for murder, that he had been living a double life with a Hungarian escort, and that the woman was pregnant with his child when he killed her. The public humiliation was swift and complete. Dubai's expatriate community, always hungry for scandal, seized upon the story with voracious appetite. Emirates' digital infrastructure terminated Majid's employment immediately, citing moral turpitude and criminal conduct. His colleagues, who had witnessed his performance as a loving husband during the corporate retreat, felt betrayed and manipulated. The company implemented new verification procedures for all spouse travel, requiring photo identification and additional documentation to prevent similar fraud. Amal filed for divorce within a week of learning the truth, her family supporting her decision despite the social stigma that would follow. Their modest apartment in Dara became a crime scene of sorts, searched by Dubai police as part of their cooperation with Georgian authorities. Every possession, every photograph, every shared memory was tainted by the knowledge of Majid's deception. In Budapest, Alina's family received the devastating news through Hungarian consular channels. Her mother, already weakened by cancer treatments, collapsed upon learning that her daughter had died alone in a foreign country while trying to support them. Her 17-year-old brother, who had been depending on Alina's financial support for university, was left with nothing but grief and guilt over the sacrifices his sister had made. The trial in Tbilisi's city court was swift and decisive. Majid pleaded guilty to murder and identity fraud, receiving a life sentence under Georgian law. The international nature of the crime attracted significant media attention, serving as a cautionary tale about the dark underbelly of Dubai's expatriate lifestyle. 2 years later, Amal had rebuilt her life as a single woman, working as an administrator for a women's support organization in Dubai. She rarely spoke about her former husband, but when she did, it was with a mixture of anger and sadness for the man she had thought she knew. Alina's family in Hungary struggled with poverty and illness, their primary source of support gone forever. The case became a turning point for Dubai's expatriate community, highlighting the vulnerabilities of foreign workers in the gray economy and the devastating consequences of unchecked deception. Corporate HR departments tightened their verification procedures, while community organizations developed better support networks for isolated expatriate women. In the end, Majid Al Mansoori's desperate attempt to live a fantasy had destroyed 4 lives: his own, his wife's, Alina's, and that of the unborn child who would never have a chance to exist. The luxury hotel suite in Tbilisi, where they had briefly played at being husband and wife, remained forever marked by the tragedy that exposed the fatal cost of deception and the dark consequences of a desperate man's refusal to accept responsibility for his choices.